Hello and welcome to the first video in a series related to research opportunities for Scholl faculty members. This first video will be related to the topic of peer review, focusing on what is peer review, why we should get involved in peer review, how to conduct a peer review, and how to get involved in the peer review process if you never have been involved in the past. So the reason for focusing on peer review actually relates to the workload model itself. If you look at the workload model, there's actually a line on the service tab that many people may glance over that says ad hoc reviewer of manuscripts, maximum of 2% full-time effort. So this is something that is valued by the college and reflected in the workload model. But even so, there are a number of other reasons to be involved in the peer review process, which you'll see in the ensuing slides. This slide summarizes the peer review process for those of you who are not familiar with it. Essentially, this is the process by which a scientist discovers something, writes up a manuscript, then submits it to the editor of a journal for consideration in that journal. If the editor of the journal feels that the topic discussed is in line with the scope of the journal and is meritorious enough to potentially be considered, he will then, or she will then, send it out to peer reviewers who will then weigh the strengths and weaknesses of the manuscript and come to a decision on the action that should be taken, which are generally one of four decisions, meaning being either to reject the manuscript outright, to allow the author to address comments and resubmit it, to accept it with small revisions, or to accept it outright. Those recommendations will go back to the editor, who makes a final decision that then goes back to the scientists, and the process continues accordingly. So I said we would kind of discuss why it is that you should get involved in peer review outside of the workload model. And this video, short video by Wiley, which is a publishing group, really does a great job of explaining the reasons you should be interested in engaging in the peer review process.
At Wiley, we believe in peer review. It's essential not just to publishing, but to the integrity of science. But for new reviewers, the peer review process may feel confusing. So we're taking a closer look at how it works and why we do it. We live in a world where a lot of grand claims get made. Journals only matter because the claims inside them are credible. So everything in a journal has to be vigorously assessed. For authors, peer review can sometimes feel tough. But nearly all agree the comments you get from reviewers help you to improve your work. So, journals seek out experts on a subject from across the world and invite them to review new research. These in-depth reviews mean that editors can make informed choices, and authors can make their work even better. But what about the reviewer? What do they get out of it? Well, a lot of academics will use peer review as a way to give back to their community. Your work will be reviewed by peers, and it feels good to do the same for others. Plus, reviewers get to interact with key people in their field, which can do a great thing for your career. And don't forget, reading the work of others and analysing their work will help you to improve your own writing. Above all though, we review for better science.
So there were several additional reasons why you should consider getting involved in the peer review process. So if you've made the decision that you do want to get involved in the process, well, what is it that you'll be doing in the process? Essentially, you'll be weighing the strengths and the weaknesses and making that final decision on your recommendation for the manuscript. When weighing strengths, these are a couple examples of things that would constitute a strong manuscript. If it presents a clear question which is justified well by the existing literature, the methods support that question, the results are appropriate for addressing that question and are valid, and the conclusions made based on the results actually follow from the results and are not overly general or not supported by the results. And overall, a strong manuscript is one that is cohesive in nature, where the hypotheses linked to the methods and data, and the results and the conclusions are supported by the results and answer the initial hypotheses. By analogy, then, weak manuscripts would be those that do not meet these standards, and you can see here a couple points that would be constituting weaknesses within a manuscript. Once you identify strengths and weaknesses, the goal as the reviewer is to weigh those and make that final decision. And here are some questions you can ask when weighing those. Do the weaknesses are there too many of them, or do they outweigh the strengths? Are any of the weaknesses so blatant that they cannot be addressed, or that they're an overwhelming problem? For example, is the study design just incorrect to answer the question of interest? And another important question to consider is, overall, do you think that publication of this manuscript would help advance the field? When you are writing your review, especially if you're new to the process, I've included here a link to a peer review checklist that will allow you to take notes on important aspects to consider in each of the different sections of the manuscript, which you can then look at to determine what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses, and use when writing up your final review. I find that this is a very helpful tool for those of you that may be new to peer review. Once you've come up with your notes and read the manuscript, you then have to write your review, and everybody writes differently, of course. But if you've never written a review, or even if you have and you want some suggestions on how you might go about writing new reviews, here is the kind of broad way that I write reviews. I start with a summary statement that indicates that I've read the work, and then I take one of three approaches listed here in the remainder of the review. And you can find examples of each of these by clicking on the link here. And if you have any questions about any of those examples, since they do contain some very specific information related to each of those articles, I'd be happy to discuss them more with you as well. When writing the review, the most important thing is to be specific and give constructive feedback that can help the authors to improve or strengthen the manuscript. Generic language is not helpful for improvements. And on the left would be language to avoid, on the right would be examples of ways to say the same things but constructively. Importantly, when you do peer review, you want to ensure that you're being a fair peer reviewer. One way to do that is to not make a rash decision about a manuscript, but rather give it time, allow yourself to read the article and then maybe step away and come back. Consider the golden rule as you should be spending as much time reviewing a manuscript as you would want someone in reviewing your own work. And remember, you're there to look at content and not style. The style can be reviewed by the editors after the fact. Remove any personal biases as well, even if you do not feel that, say, for example, the surgical intervention being addressed is the best one to consider. That doesn't necessarily mean that the research itself is weak. And you can use that as a point in your review, but it should not cause you to outright reject the manuscript. So just to summarize, I want to present this second video by Wiley, which is several researchers talking about why they feel that the peer review process is important and is effective.
I think probably the most important outcome is that every paper that is published has been properly validated, and also that thanks to peer review, there is enough information in the paper to go and replicate the study.
The most important outcome of peer review, and why I like to be both a reviewer and be reviewed, is we advance the field by fitting our understandings together, sort of taking a new insight that might be important to me and getting advice from colleagues about how to fit it so that it's the most current, has the edge of the research best represented in the literature that's cited, and then shows us how the piece goes to the next place.
I believe the most important outcome is quality publications. So the better the peer review, the better the publication.
So other resources, similar types of videos can be found at these two links. And if you search YouTube, there are other examples of videos teaching you how you can conduct a peer review and some ways to have an effective written document when reviewing. The final question then is, how can I get involved, particularly if you never have been involved before? The primary way to get involved in the peer review process is to contact managing editors of journals and let them know you're interested in reviewing. One way this can be done is by having colleagues who currently view for those journals recommend you to review the next time they're unavailable. And the other way is to be a little bit more proactive and You can do that by joining a site called Publons, which I'm about to show you. Publons is also great for tracking your reviews. I'm going to show you right now my homepage on Publons. And this is what you'll see if you create an account on your homepage. If you're then interested in peer reviewing, you can then click on Journals. Under Journals, click Reviewer of Interest. Click here if you want to express an interest. Then let's say I can search for the word ankle. I come up with all the journals related to the ankle and say I would like to become a reviewer for Foot and Ankle International. I click on that, and then I would just click here to let them know I was interested in reviewing, and then they would get back to you with additional information they may need to know in order to make the best decisions as to what articles may be appropriate for you to review. Finally, what's really nice about Publons too is if you do get involved in the peer review process, this allows you to track your reviews by sending them confirmation that you completed a review. For example, on November 18, 2020, I completed a review for gait and posture related to effects of Unity prostheses. And this is good. This is important to keep metrics so that when the workload model comes out, you have proof that you completed the reviews that you say you did. So finally, then, I'd like to conclude by asking you to send me any questions you may have and any feedback you may have related to this specific video, or any ways to improve the content or ideas for future content. Importantly, if watching this or future videos causes you to seek out research opportunities that you would not have otherwise done so, please let me know that as well. And please look out for upcoming videos in this area of opportunities for faculty to get involved more in research. Thank you for watching, and take care.